Good morning. My name is Siddharth Gazula, and I'll be your host for today's session. I've been an intern at the India Association in Minnesota since 2019, and I'm currently a junior at Wayzata High School.
Hi, I'm Kiran Bandi, President, India Association of Minnesota. IAM would like to acknowledge with deep gratitude and humility that now we stand on the land that was the homeland of Dakota Ojibwe people in Minnesota. India Association of Minnesota is a nonprofit organization spanning over 4 decades of community service since its inception in 1973. IAM aims to build a strong and cohesive community of over 50,000 plus strong Asians in the great state of Minnesota. Through its three-pronged mission of culture, charity, and connections, IAM seeks to build bridges of understanding between Asian Indians and the society at large within the state and the country.
Before we introduce our speaker for today, we would like to play a short docuseries that Dr. Seth was featured in called Not the Science Type.
There's a stereotype of scientists, one, that they're male and they're boring, they don't dress well, and they're like very awkward. I'm obviously not that type.
My name is Dr. Sierra Civils. I'm a nuclear engineer.
My name is Dr. Jessica Taff. I'm a microbiologist.
My name is Jayshree Seth. I'm a scientist at 3M.
My name is Gitanjali Rao. I'm 15 years old and I'm an innovator, scientist, and promoter of STEM.
I was the first Black woman to get a PhD in nuclear engineering. I saw that as an opportunity to open the door for people that look like me to come and be involved in these fields.
A scientist is anybody, and it shouldn't be based on age, race, or gender. It should be based on our capabilities and our motivation to tackle world problems.
I want to tell the next generation of STEM students that you don't have to be what people expect from a scientist. The more stereotypes we break, the better outcomes we're going to have because we invite more people into the world of science. We need every diverse perspective in order to solve problems.
Wherever we're going, wherever we're racing, we're gonna keep riding.
If you inspire a girl and show her the different ways that she can do what she loves,
You open their eyes. Then they look at you and think, if she can do that, I can do that. And my message to them is, yes, you can.
she can change the world.
And we will be tameless. We will be tameless.
There's a stereotype.
Today, we are honored to have Dr. Jayshree Seth as our guest speaker today. Dr. Seth is a corporate scientist at 3M. She has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from India, and she obtained her PhD in chemical engineering from Clarkson University in New York. She currently has over 72 patents for a variety of innovations, with several more pending. Dr. Seth was the first female engineer to be inducted into the Carton Society 3M Science and Engineering Hall of Fame, and she received the highest achievement from the Society of Women's Engineers. Jayshree is the author of the book, The Heart of Science, Engineering, Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Jayshree Seth.
Thank you, Sid. Hope you can hear me.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And let me know when you can see it.
Yep, everything looks great.
Excellent. Well, thank you to Indian Association of Minnesota for this opportunity. Thank you, Sid, for the introduction. And I know a team has worked behind the scenes to make this happen, so I appreciate that. And there's a very simple reason that I wanted to talk to this, sort of Indian Association of Minnesota and the students across the spectrum and the parents. So I'm hoping that some of the parents are on as well. And let me start with this very simple question. So I'm going to try and forward here, which it doesn't want to do. So there you go. So I have a very simple question. How do you think how important science is? We have just lived through the pandemic. We're just getting to meet other people again. We can shake hands. We can go to restaurants. We can hug people. How important do you think science has been in that? So type in the chat if you think it's very important. If it's not so important, I want to see what people think. And if anybody in middle school wants to come on and actually say what you think, how important science is, I'd be very excited to hear. Anybody from middle school? Otherwise, I'm going to have to call on Sid. No takers from middle school. Okay, Sid, you got to get to answer then.
Okay, so I think that science is pretty important just because it kind of like makes decisions and innovations with pretty much everything we do. Like
Right.
right now we're on Zoom, which requires like lots of different components of science. It requires a team of engineers and lots of years of innovation. It's just crazy because 20 years ago, I doubt people would ever think that we could be doing this on a computer. But no,
Absolutely.
really
Absolutely.
seamless.
And it's that and the vaccine, the gift of the vaccine. So the whole world was in this pandemic and all of us were facing the same crisis, the same fears. And then here we were all waiting for the same gift of science. And now that we have the vaccine, we can actually, so science has been really important and it's never been more important, as it is right now, because like you said, how would we communicate with each other? How would we call our parents and grandparents in other countries if we didn't have the science and technology that has afforded us? So it is extremely important. So why am I telling you that it's important when most of you think it is important, or at least I think most of you think that it's important? It is because some interesting data that we uncovered a few years ago. So in 2018, we did this survey across the globe, 14 countries, 1,000 respondents per country, and 40% of the people, so that's 4 out of 10 people said if science didn't exist, their lives would not be different. Isn't that amazing? 40%, 4 out of 10 are saying, I don't know, science not that important. And get this, they were taking the survey on their laptops or mobile phones. So exactly, it's a laughing matter, but it's also a matter to cry because it seems like science is invisible, it's underappreciated, it's taken for granted. Just as Sid said, we wouldn't be on the Zoom if it wasn't for science and technology and innovation, but people are just not recognizing that. And that's sort of a problem. And that's why people like me are talking about it, because there is a general population out there which believes that science is not that important. And when that happens, you start getting into trouble because people don't listen to scientists, people don't listen to the guidelines that are being provided, and a lot of people don't take vaccines because they don't believe in the science that has gone into it. So there's lots of problems that can happen if people don't appreciate, understand science, and understand the scientific method that is used to come at different things like the vaccine. We also found in this survey lots of things about the people's relationship with science. People said, yeah, I was more excited about science when I was a kid. I'm not that interested anymore. In fact, one of the results said, there is no reason for me to understand science as an adult, which is also very interesting. The pandemic has shown us that all of us need to have at least enough critical thinking to understand what's going on around us. There was also this big thing about people thinking you have to be a genius to pursue a career in science. And I think this comes from the stereotypes. When you show Albert Einstein and you show all these people who are genius, people start believing that that's what they need to be. And that's not true. That is certainly not true. You don't have to be a genius. Do you have to work hard? Yes. But do you have to work hard in any other career to become successful? Yes. So it does require hard work and persistence, but it isn't about this genius characteristic. What we also found is interesting. When you ask the parents, do you want your kids to know more about science? Almost all the parents surveyed around the world said, yes, I want my kids to know more about science. In fact, 8 out of 10 said, I want my kids to pursue a career in science. So that's very interesting. The parents are saying, I don't know about science. I don't think it's important. My life wouldn't have been any different. But you kids, you go do science. And that doesn't work that way. If parents don't believe in this, usually the kids don't believe in this. And I know that because I try to impart my own biases to my children. So it's very difficult to say, you go do something when the parents don't believe in it. So that's another reason why we need to talk about it. Now, I already mentioned that the pandemic has had a huge impact on the public perception of science. In fact, it's the first time people are beginning to say, "Oh yeah, I'm not skeptical of science." You know, that number has gone down of the people who used to say that I'm very skeptical of science. And in fact, trust in science has gone up, and it's because of what happened during the pandemic. People realized that science was at the center stage. Scientists was in the center stage. Science was in the spotlight because we needed to provide guidelines, needed to develop therapy, needed to develop vaccines, and really keep people safe. So I think people started to have this appreciation of science. But we also found out something interesting, which is a reason why I'm talking to you all, is too many students say that they have been deterred from going into STEM. You know, the much older people than you all said, yeah, there was nobody stopping me from going to science. But now the younger generations are saying, well, you know, I've been discouraged. So we tried to dig deeper into this in our survey that we did in 2020. And what we found is that many people around the world say that I cannot become a scientist because my school does not have science. So that's one of the big reasons why kids aren't able to pursue science. So we all live in a big city where we have all the access to everything, but there are a lot of people around the world who don't have access to science. So that's a problem. Another thing was people said that I was told I was not smart enough. That's really sad to hear, because by whose definition, on what basis, and so early on, why are people hearing those kinds of things? Then another very troublesome thing is inequalities. People said, I can't be a scientist, I was told, because of my gender. I can't be a scientist because of my race. I can't be a scientist because of my ethnicity. And that is a big problem. Any kind of problem that you want to solve, if you don't have very diverse group looking at it, you are not going to come up at the solution. You may find a solution, but it will definitely not be the best solution you could have had. And we have seen examples of this play out entire human history, and we are seeing some of them play out now. A lot of people are refusing the vaccine because they don't believe that it was developed in a way that they understand that it may be good for them or not good for them. So there's a lot of reasons why representation is very important. There's also 1/4 of the people, so 25% said, I was told that science is just for geeks or nerds. This is another one of those stereotypes that is very, very damaging, because we need everybody to be excited about science, and having those stereotypes stops people from being excited about it. And we need people, because we do know that we have many challenges we face. We are going through a healthcare challenge right now with the pandemic, and we know we have lots of sustainability challenges to face. We have to fix the environmental issues. We have to fix the social issues. We have to fix all of these sustainable development goals. So we need everybody to be excited about this. So, and I should point out, sorry, I forgot, that this area of inequality was highest in the US among all the countries we surveyed. So it's very important for us to make sure that we fix these issues. So then we also ask the questions, okay, how do you think we can inspire more people to be excited about science? And the number one was teach in a more engaging way. We have to teach in a way that students are more excited about it. We also have to show students that it helps you make the world a better place. If you don't talk about this very important context, a lot of people will not opt for science because they feel like it's not helping their goal, which is to make the world a better place, help people, improve lives. Third one is show the different career opportunities in science. People think about science and they think about scientists based on things they may have heard in media or they may have seen in movies. And they're typically not so great for scientists. They'll either show them as a geek or a loner or a maverick or as an evil guy out to just, destroy the world and all of those things. That does not put them in a good light. So we have to show that there are many, many, many different career opportunities in science. In fact, anything that you can think of, just look around you, anything you can think of, there is a career in science for that particular thing. Anything that you're interested in, there's a career in science. But we don't talk about it. People don't know that there are scientists doing this or that. I'll give you a great example. A coworker of mine said his son said that he would like to design, he loves going on roller coasters. And he said, I want to design roller coasters. Science can't help me do that. And his dad showed him the career of a roller coaster designer. And that is exactly a scientist who does that. So when you're kids, you don't really understand that there are careers out there. So I strongly recommend that you search yourself or go to an adult and ask them, do you think there's a career in that particular thing that is in that area? And you'll find that all roads will lead to that. So sometimes kids just don't even know what they don't know, and parents don't know that the kids don't know. So this is one of those areas where you really have to provide exposure that all of us do many, many different things in our career in science. So teaching in a more engaging way, showing how it has prosocial goals, and then showing that you have different career opportunities. And the reason why I talk about that is very important to me. So let me tell you how I started. I was never interested in a science career, but I grew up on the campus of what is a premier engineering institution in India. It is actually the oldest engineering institution in all of Asia. It's called University of Roorkee. Now it's called IIT Roorkee. But this place was just a STEM town. And my dad was an engineering professor. And all the kids, the expectation was that you're all going to become engineers. And I was like, I don't think so, because I have no idea what that is and I don't want to do it. But everybody around us was doing it. And back in the day when I was growing up in India, you basically did what your parents told you to do. So I was told to become an engineer, and that's what I tried to become. Now, the reason why I didn't want to become an engineer was I didn't think that it had anything to do with my goals. And my goals were, I want to help people, I want to solve problems, and I want to improve lives. Nobody explained to me that that is exactly what engineers do, because everybody assumed that everybody else knew about this. And where I found inspiration was actually in what is called the Kul Geet, which means the song of the family, which means the school song. And our school song said basically that you are going to work hard to make the world a better place and commit to a greater good, which means you will work for the betterment of society. And I thought, you know what, if that's what engineers do, then maybe that's great inspiration for me. So I got my inspiration from what I liked, which was a school song. And my whole entire career has been based on bringing these three things: working hard, because nothing can be done without hard work, bringing in new ideas. And that's why I have 72 patents. For those of you who don't know, that's a lot of patents for an individual to have. But it's only because I want to solve problems, I want to come up with new ideas, and I want to bring innovation for the greater good, which is to work on projects that help everybody in society. So those are the kinds of things I feel strongly about. So when they asked me to be the chief science advocate for the company, my first reaction was, I can't do it, because I wasn't one of those kids who wakes up every morning saying, I want to do science or I want to be an engineer. I wasn't one of those. But then I realized that it's important for me to take this role on, because perhaps there are so many kids out there who think the same and they think they can't be successful. So let me tell you, I wasn't the science type. I wasn't breaking apart toys trying to understand how they work. I wasn't curious all the time about all the world things around me, but I ended up in science and I've done really well. I've been very successful. It's because I brought my mindset, and science needs that. Science needs innovation, it needs creativity, and it needs different kinds of mindsets. And I never thought I would be doing this, which means I'm working in the lab solving problems. I've also got this role as chief science advocate. I travel around the world talking about science, and actually 3M paid for me to get makeup and get this picture done. So really, this impressed my daughter. That was the first thing that impressed her. She's like, 3M is going to pay for your makeup? I'm like, yes, they are. And she finally thought I was the cool scientist. So there's all sorts of different careers, and I never dreamt in my life that I would be able to do what I wanted to do, which is to solve problems, help people, and once in a while get makeup on and have this wonderful art and science of digital photography make me look so good. So what am I doing as a chief science advocate? I say we have to raise the awareness and appreciation of science in our daily lives. People don't understand how important science is to everything that they're doing and that is around them. Like Sid pointed out, we would not be on the Zoom call if it wasn't for great science and technology, but it's all in the background and we don't think about it. We have to bring it in the forefront and talk about it. Second, we have to break down these barriers. Oh, I'm not smart enough to do science. So let me give you another example. I told you that I grew up in Roorkee. Most people would assume I would have gone to school in Roorkee. It's a top institution and I must be so smart to go there. I didn't even get in. I didn't get in. And anybody of my age who is listening to this understands what a disaster it is when your family expects you to get into the engineering college and you don't. Your life literally stops right there. But my parents, luckily, were visionaries and they said, okay, you didn't get into this institution, you'll go somewhere else. So I went to a place very, very far away from home, completely different part of India. And if you ever watch my 7-minute piece in that docuseries that we showed the trailer of, you'll realize what my journey was about. And I still stuck with science and I still made it. And I'm having a very satisfying career. So it's not that you have to be a genius or you have to be super smart or anything like that. If you just work hard and you keep the goal of, I want to make a world a better place, you can be a scientist. The third part is, again, very personal to me, which is nobody explained to me that you can do what I'm doing right now. Partly because people didn't know, and partly because it's not communicated. It's always communicated about the science, not about the bigger picture. So that's what I want to talk more about, is the context that you are championing science with. And it also came literally full circle for me when I dealt with my kids. I have a son and a daughter. My son was always very excited about the content. Oh, we're going to go to robotics. Yay, we're going to go to robotics. That was good enough for me. For him, for my daughter, why? Why are we doing this? Why is it important? How does it help people? So those prosocial goals were very front and center for her as well. So I realized the importance of communicating science in that particular context. So that's kind of what we're doing at 3M. And I talk about the fact that we have to clearly highlight the connections to everyday life. The laptop, the phone, the planes that you take, everything has such important pieces of science associated with it. Spotlight on the humans, not just on the innovation, but the humans who are doing it are average, ordinary people who have exactly the same values and desires and passions, and then keeping all these STEM things in the limelight so you can encourage different people to pursue those careers. I also talk a lot about one of the problems we have in the field of science, which is female underrepresentation. You have many, many more men who are in science and engineering and technology than there are women. And it's not a matter of capability, because everybody knows that women are just as capable in science as men are. But the problem is that you don't have enough role models. So you've got the stereotype issue, and most girls say, I don't want to be that nerdy, geeky scientist, and don't realize that you can also be the cool scientist. We don't tell the wholesome story about science. We only focus on a very narrow slice. We don't talk about it in the fact that I wanted to hear, that it actually helps people improve lives. You don't have enough exposure and encouragement. There are not many allies and advocates, and you have to put metrics and measures. You have to say, for example, in a workplace, how many women do you have in science? How many do you have in leadership roles? And you have to change that. Otherwise, the situation never changes, and you'll have the same kind of people from the same town in Minnesota with the same UFM degree working in the same area. You're never going to solve problems if that's the situation. You have to have diversity of thought. So, for example, at 3M, when we realized, 55 million kids are now home. How do we encourage them to pursue science? Those are the kinds of things we're doing at 3M. You know, a lot of my counterparts were working on the masks and respirators, and that was suddenly needed, and it was needed in so much more quantity. So they were working hard on doubling their production and making more and more of their masks and respirators. So the rest of us decided that we would make this video series. So I know there was a question before the meeting on how I can encourage my kids to pursue science. This is a great vehicle to do that. It's called Science at Home, and you can actually do small experiments. So the one that I did was baking soda and vinegar and blowing up a balloon. But the idea is to explain to kids that there are some core scientific principles around that. So we do a lot of those kinds of things also. And it's very interesting to see that skepticism for science is down and trust is up. People are seeing the role science has played during the pandemic, and it continues. The question is, as the pandemic gets over, will it continue, or will people forget again how much important science was when the vaccine was needed? And that is why it is an important time to talk about this out in the open and say science solves problems and scientists help improve lives. And we have a lot of challenges we face because of global climate change, because of sustainability issues across the board that science can help solve. So that is why I'm here to talk to you about that if somebody hasn't told you that science can solve problems and you can connect up with all those sustainability challenges that we know we need to solve for, yes, you can do that if you pursue science, because it is very important. So what about those people who haven't pursued science but are interested? More power to you, because you can become champions for science in your own community. You don't have to be a scientist to do that. You can still be a very enthusiastic champion for science. You can still follow critical thinking skills. You can still send to people who are spreading misinformation and disinformation on social media some really important articles that you know are validated by scientists and science professionals. So a lot of things that everybody can do, because at the end of the day, science spells hope for people right now. So we did the survey in 2021, and what we found is, and this time we went to 17 countries, people said hope is what I feel when I see science. I feel like the hero image of science can remain if we follow sustainability and path to sustainability. If we do STEM equity, which is providing access for science to underrepresented minorities. We all know what happened in Minnesota, right in our backyard. Social justice issues, really big social justice issues. And we were so proud when IAM stepped up and actually did an event supporting Black Lives Matter, showing that, yes, we as people of color also stand behind the social justice issues, and we need to, because we are a very affluent and a community that has done really well, but we have all done it on the shoulders of giants. So we need to take this equity very seriously. And there's an expectation of shared responsibility. All of our communities that have been successful have to do the payback and give back and pay it forward to all these communities and bring diversity into STEM, because hope is how it is going to really work out, because there are a lot of people who still don't believe in science. So if we maintain this hero image by keeping center stage, opportunity for STEM equity, give a path to sustainability and this shared responsibility, then we can make sure that a very robust science community succeeds. And these are the kinds of questions that you had. How do I develop my children's interest in science? Give them prosocial goals, show them how it improves lives, take them to the museum and show them all these different things that science can help solve for. There were questions around, how do I make sure that I can pursue my interest in science, start taking science classes, get interested in clubs and things like that promote scientific interest. And if you feel like they are not welcoming, address those issues and help adults help you change that. If it means that everybody out there doesn't look like you, you still need to make sure that you are represented. And it's important. Band together, form different groups and communities, find opportunities outside of your school environment to pursue these interests, and have the adults help you do that. There are many adults, your parents and others, who will make sure that they can step in and help you do that. There's all sorts of resources and opportunities out there. There were many questions about challenges that I faced in STEM, and I've already talked about it. The challenge that I didn't think STEM was for me, and I was wrong. And once I realized that it was for me, I was inspired to pursue it. I did not get into any of the top schools. I'm not from a top school in India. I'm not in top school in the US. In fact, I work at 3M, and I didn't even go to a school where 3M recruits at. I came in through the back door as a summer student. So challenges across the board, but it's not that those have held me back, because I knew I wanted to solve problems. I knew that I could work hard to solve problems. And when I need to find the experts who know how to solve those problems, I go collaborate with them. So the idea of collaboration, the idea of solving problems, and the idea of helping people and improving lives that has been center at my journey has not stopped me from doing anything because I wasn't educated in Ivy League schools. Nothing against Ivy Leagues. More power to you if you can make it to those, but I wasn't, and I'm here to tell you, I am at the highest level at 3M, and I have none of those things. So I clearly want to be a living example of those who can do this despite not having the kind of credentials many people think that they need. You don't need those. You just need the ability to persevere. And that's it. And that's that. And that's whether you want to be a musician, whether you want to be a famous artist, or you want to be a successful scientist. That always comes with the territory that you'll have to work hard. You know, very few are very lucky who don't have to, but for the rest of us, that's just the way it is. And you can't count on something that very few have. But remember this, we have a lot of privilege. We have a lot of people in our community who have a lot of highly educated people. So we have that privilege. And so we have to make sure we use our pocket of privilege to pay back. There were also lots of questions about girls and minorities in STEM. And I think I've addressed many of this. We have to, definitely dismantle the stereotypes or the archetypes. We have to make sure we don't typecast or tokenism. And we have to make sure we change the constructs that deter our young girls and women to go into science, persist in science, or pursue science. And that's very important. With that, I want to tell you that globally, people agreed that this is important. And we saw that in our State of Science Index. People said science needs more diversity. And perhaps we have ended up in some of the areas where we ended up because there wasn't enough diversity. There weren't even enough people from around the world. There are not enough ethnicities, not many women and girls. Otherwise, things would have turned out differently. So this is important that we understand that the world wants that diversity. And this is an important time for us to step up and increase that. And that's why people like me are out here talking about this. And this documentary, that docuseries that Sid talked about at the outset, has been a very interesting experience for me. I was called on to be a scientist that will be featured in this. And I actually talked about my story, how I came from India, how I pursued this journey. I wasn't in any of these schools, but I took this attitude and I worked on these different things. One of the first projects that I worked on when I came to 3M was how to keep diapers closed. That's a very important problem if you think about it. And I wasn't trained on how to keep diapers closed, right? I'd never seen a diaper before. Truth be told, I came from India. Back in the day, they were using cloth diapers. So it was the first time I'm seeing this diaper. Now I got to figure out how to keep it closed on a baby. And I thought, that's important. And so I talk about that in the docuseries and solving different problems, etc. So, and many of you must have heard of Gitanjali Rao. She was the Time Kid of the Year. She's one of those people who is also highlighted in this. She doesn't have a single science degree, but she has solved so many science problems just to show that you can get inspiration anywhere. So, and I met her recently again. I've met her a few times, but we all went to New York City where this movie actually premiered during the Tribeca Film Festival. So it was a great experience. So again, I get to the same point. If people say that you can't have exciting experiences as a scientist, that's wrong too. I've traveled around the world, I've spoken to people around the world, and I've got this cool experiences, and I never knew that I would have them as a scientist. So and then we've already seen the trailer, so I should just forward from that. And I have left all the links here for anybody who wants to follow. Science Index is the global survey that we do. And if you go to 3m.com/science index, you can check out all the results from around the world if you're interested, all different countries. What did people say? It's real fun. You can actually slice and dice it, say what the young folks said, what the older folks said, what different areas, countries said. Science at Home is our series that you can follow along to do simple science experiments like the baking soda and vinegar one, but it also goes deeper to explain to you why it's important. Not the Science Type is the link to the various docuseries sections. So every one of them is about 7.5 minutes or so. So please go ahead, watch them, like them. It's great to spread the word. And if you want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, more on LinkedIn, so maybe your parents can. And then the book is on Amazon. This book I basically wrote during the pandemic. After what happened with the George Floyd thing, I felt really strange. I felt like, how come I didn't know about the systemic aspect of racism? And I honestly didn't know how systemic it was. And it was basically because I hadn't educated myself on it. And I felt really guilty in a way of not being a good person by not knowing that. So I went and got this whole reading list and a documentary list and history books. And I watched all these documentaries and read all of this. And I realized how wrong this has been, how it has been systemic, and more importantly, how little I had done to help that issue. And so I got this idea that I've all these essays that I've written about my journey, about how I've encouraged my kids to pursue science, how has been my own journey, etc. And I approached Society of Women Engineers and I told them, I know there's a problem for women in science. I have all these articles. Can I compile them? And can you publish this as a book? And I want all proceeds to go for a scholarship for a Black woman in STEM. And we actually wrote that into the scholarship. So I'm very excited to say that we have sold enough copies that the first Jayshree said Women of Color STEM scholarship will be given in this fall. So please help us. If you can buy this book, it's a very easy read. All proceeds go to this scholarship. So I'm very excited about that. But that was my way of looking at my own pockets of privilege, being so privileged that my dad was a professor who said, you can go into science. Who is telling these young kids who have no role models, no environment, no influence? It's our responsibility in society to bring them up. So those kinds of things, those pockets of privilege. The other pocket of privilege I have is I have a great job at a great company. And when the pandemic hit, I could cocoon myself in my sunroom in my privilege and work from home. A lot of frontline people could not do that. And that also clearly shows the privilege that our community has. So think about everything that is a privilege for us that other people don't have, and keep that altruistic mindset as you're going through your science journey. That's what this book will sort of highlight. So I thank you all for listening. I want to wish you all the best in your journey. And if we can open it up to any questions you may have that I may or may not have answered. I want to thank Ellis and the entire team for organizing this. I understand that it was opened up to people from across the spectrum. So we may have younger students, middle school, high school, and even adults. So I apologize if I couldn't address that. So this is our opportunity to do that. I hope we have time to do that. We do.
Before we begin with the Q&A session, we asked that any questions be placed using the chat feature on Zoom. But to begin with, that was a really awesome, great, insightful presentation. Thank you so much for that. We'll begin with some few questions that we received using the Google form.
Okay.
And our first one is, what have your biggest challenges been when it comes to succeeding in a STEM career? Whether that's like just a career in corporate America, or it's like a challenge that you've encountered with the project.
I think I mentioned many of them, right? I wasn't a science and engineering kid. My parents told me to do it, but they were very smart. So point for the parents, they're usually pretty smart. They knew that I was holding myself back without recognizing why I was holding myself back. Another challenge was I grew up in way, way north of India. And I went to school in way, way south in India. And for those of you who know India well, you know that that means a change of language. That means a change of norms. It means social customs. It means food, lots of things. So I ended up in this environment where I didn't know anything and I didn't know anybody. And that was a challenge, but I just muscled through it because I realized that I didn't realize it back then, but I know now that that actually equipped me for being successful later in my life, because I then moved into the US, where again, it's a new culture, new social norms. Of course, this time I knew the language, but you can imagine when the culture is different, there is a lot of difference in your language. Starting from a simple question of how are you? people just expect you to say fine, thank you, and move on. I didn't know that. So when first time I was asked, how are you? I tried to explain how I was, and you realize that that's not what is done. So although you know the language, there's a lot more depth to it. So navigating through that is one of those things. The second thing is when you are in a particular field and you have ideas about different fields, you may hold yourself back thinking, I don't know anything about it, so I better be quiet. And that is a challenge when you realize that you have a lot to offer and you have to step outside of your comfort zone and say, no, I think this could be a great idea. So that could be a challenge. So I highly recommend to people not hold back and actually say that you have these ideas in these other areas. So I have to tell you this, my PhD is in making diamond-like carbon films out of plasma deposition. My master's is in growing crystals in space and modeling that growth. And I can tell you, I never went to space and I never worked on diamond-like films ever again. And I had to work in a completely different area of diapers. So I went from diamonds to diapers. And the only way you succeed in working in different areas is you ask yourself the questions constantly. What can I learn? How do I learn it? How do I work with people who know what they're doing? And how do I come up with new ideas? So that can be a challenge if you don't recognize this early on. And especially now, science is moving so fast that you'll constantly have to face that challenge. So get used to it very fast. And the last one I would say is when I was thrust into this role, this is not something that I was trained for. And suddenly I'm talking to thousands of people around the world. And it was a little bit of a challenge. I've got an accent. I'm only 5 feet tall on a good day. All these things can hold me back, right? But I was like, nope, I'm going to have to muscle through and build a strong message so that people understand. And when I go into a auditorium and I find that the podium is taller than me, I'm not shy at all. I say, lower that podium. I am not some 6 foot tall guy, but I will be heard, so all those little challenges you have to face, but it's okay. That's what makes you stronger. That's the beauty of it.
Wow. So I know you talked about diapers already, but can you tell us about one of your most favorite, interesting, or even weirdest projects that you've got the chance to work on?
Yeah, so I'll take one which we never commercialized, which speaks to the idea that there are many, many, many setbacks when you're working on something. So we were actually working on the core of the diaper, in this case with a very big company that I won't name, that was very interested in something that we could develop for the core of the diaper. And the idea was to actually separate the poop from the liquid. So it was so funny that I would be talking highly scientific presentation. So we would call it the BM, or the bowel movement. And that was always something that brought snickers and smiles to people's faces, because you can't call it poop. But then I decided that you're talking about bowel movement. People are snickering inside. So I used to call it the poop loop. So the loop that is going to trap the poop. So it's funny. It's all science. But I worked on that project. It was a very interesting project. 3 years we worked on it, and we weren't able to commercialize it. But many, many, many things we did led to many, many other innovations in completely different areas. So that's another very important point. When you work on something, never call it a failure. Did you learn something? Yes, then it's not a failure. Very important point. And not only did I recognize that, I also made it a point to tell others. When people said, we never commercialized it, I always said, but we learned so much. We developed relationship with this very key customer. And here's 5 inventions that came out of the fact we did all of this. So again, linking it back to the challenges.
And I know you mentioned the science at home opportunity for people to gain exposure to experiments just from their house, the simplicity of that. But what are your suggestions for girls to be taken seriously in STEM activities in their formative years in high school, as well as college and beyond?
Yeah, a very good question. And I think I addressed that a bit as well during my presentation. As parents, you will have to see whether your girls are really inspired by that prosocial goals. From an evolutionary perspective, I believe, and there's enough research out there now that says that girls are more excited about things that bring community, bring collaboration, and more communal goals, as opposed to boys who are usually more inspired by the content and agentic goals. What that means is I'm okay as an individual, girls will look more for community. So for example, with my daughter, she would not want to take science classes unless there were 3 or 4 of her friends in those science classes. I'm not sure how many boys would have cared about that. It's not right or wrong. It's not right or wrong. It's just different. And different is good. Imagine if it was only, one caste, one creed, one color, one ethnicity, one village that were all doing science and everybody else was not. All these other problems would never get addressed. So we really need to have that outlook. So for girls, I think, go to the prosocial goals. And I'll give you a clear example of my own children. My daughter said she does not want to enroll in after-school science class. Of course, I wanted her to enroll in after-school science class because I'm a scientist, also because I'm Indian. Let's just accept that. And science, we know, has got really strong opportunity to shape the future. So you want your children to be in those areas. And for her, it was like, no, I want to solve problems. Okay, what problem do you want to solve? So she said, I want to solve the problem of lead in water. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such a big problem. That's what was going on, Michigan Flint water crisis. And she said, Mommy, that's what I want to do. So now it was up to me to figure out how to help her solve that problem. So we did. We went, I called the university because I'm not equipped. I don't know anything about lead in water. I don't know anything about it. So we called the university, found people who can help her, and she did a little project in that. She was asked to pick up the pine cones from the yard, and my husband said, we'll give you $1 if you pick a whole bag of 25 pine cones. And she's like, I don't want to pick the pine cones. Why don't you let the grass grow on it? And we said, well, the grass doesn't grow here. Well, why doesn't the grass grow under the evergreen trees? We live in an evergreen farm. It used to be an evergreen farm, so the community was built here. So I said, you find out, why don't these things grow under those trees? She found out that the pine needles make the soil acidic. When the soil is acidic, the grass doesn't grow. How can you fix that problem? She said, I figured it out. I looked on the internet. You can add something to make it more basic. Okay, let's do the experiment. So we brought soil inside, we put a grow light on, and she grew mung beans in it because she said, I want to grow dal because I eat dal. And that was the experiment. So the idea I'm trying to say is you have to go where the kids are curious. What problem do you want to solve? You have to try and help them. You have to try and learn a little bit. And once they're inspired, they will be excited about it. And that's what got her excited into science. That's when she started doing projects. So I give you my own personal example. And she won local science fairs because she was able to talk about her own story. I wanted to do this. I know we as Indian parents can be a pushy sometimes and push them to solve the problems that we think are important. But if it comes from the children, it is much more stronger. So for girls, getting them excited, ask them, what problem would you like to solve? And make them more curious about that particular area. Help them get that information, and then you'll see how excited they are.
So, sorry, I muted the wrong device, but we have a question from Ria, and she asks, in your opinion, which project that you worked on has made the biggest difference in the world?
Very good question, Priya. So I really liked my project on diapers because that's where I started out. And again, from what you know about me, I want a very human context to the problems I solve. And the idea that this was going to help keep the diapers on little babies as they're wiggling around was really inspiring to me. The thing that I worked on was to make it softer and softer, because when the diapers that I saw, when I entered the workforce 28 years ago, were very sharp cornered tapes, and they were stiff. And I didn't have any children. I'd never been around babies, but I still wondered, how doesn't that dig into their, this beer belly that they have, and certainly they were stiff and they stuck into the baby's gut and things like that. So making them softer was a great, thing that I worked on. So that's one. The other things that I'm working on now are all very, very sustainability minded. And so I really feel that they make a big impact on the environment. How do you make the tapes that we're making with the lowest possible raw material in it? How do you make the tapes that I'm making with the minimum environmental impact? How do you make these adhesives and tapes last longer, work in environments where you don't have to make new ones and this works for the long amount of time? How do you make them so that they can withstand really high temperatures or really cold temperatures so that they can last longer? Things like that have a very strong environmental sustainability feature to them. That's what helps me. And what I've personally been very interested in is how do we build community at 3M? How do we build community with the organizations outside? How can we help other people? So I've had ad hoc projects. Like I spent 2 weeks in Ghana, Africa, working, and it was all through 3M, working on how to provide safe water in remote locations. So things like that are also very exciting, being part of the 3M community.
And then we have one question from Sanvi, and I know that you talked about diapers, but perhaps like another project that you had a lot of fun with. Would you mind sharing about that?
One of the projects that I worked on was actually on face oil remover film. Sorry, that's a very technical name. But if you go into Target or wherever you shop, and you will see something called a face oil remover. It's a Neutrogena product, Clean and Clear or something. It's for acne and stuff like that. So you just press it on your face and the oil gets absorbed in this film, and then you can throw it off. And that was a fascinating project for me because I knew nothing about cosmetics. I never used cosmetics. My mom never used it, so I never knew anything about them. I came to the US and I was so busy working that I never had the opportunity to figure out what else is out there. And sometimes when you shop there, you just don't know because there's aisles and aisles of hope in a bottle, like stuff like that. So I got to know a lot more about cosmetics because of this. So I traveled for Paris, France to work with L'Oreal. I traveled to Tokyo, Japan and work with Shiseido. And so all these opportunities of learning new things about cosmetics that I never knew, how much of that is about marketing and really how little it is about the ingredients that are in there sometimes, and how much research goes into the packaging versus how much research goes into the actual materials. And then also how the business of cosmetics is. And I didn't know that Estee Lauder owns literally 10 of these companies, and they're all market segmenting. That if you want to go for youth, then it's Estee Lauder Clinique. If you want to go for older women, it's this. So it just opened up my eyes to the side of business that I didn't know. And those are learnings that I carried on with me because it related to brands. How do you make brand loyalty? How do you advertise for certain brands? And then when I start looking at ads, I realize, oh, I see what they're doing. I see what they're doing. So you don't know all of these things because you are in a science area and you've never been exposed to these other areas. So that's another thing I'd like to point out. When you go into a career, if you have an expansive view of things, you will get better at what you do because you know so much more about the other aspects of this business you are in. So if you go into business, try to learn about the technical. If you go into a technical area, try to learn about the business. You'll just become much more savvier and you'll become much more successful because you're able to talk other people's language. And I have to say the ability to talk to other people's language came from very early on when I decided as a North Indian to learn Tamil, which is a language that has absolutely nothing to do with what I knew. But the idea of learning another language to be able to talk to people is something that goes across science also. And so bringing that art into science is so critical. In fact, I like to say the real shtick is STEM. It's science, humanities, technology, engineering, and math. Nobody talks about it, but the human context of that is what is really making science successful.
So we have two quick questions before we'd like to share some news about IAM. And one of them is from Divya, and I'm just going to kind of reword it. But if you were to give one piece of advice, just straightforward, to women in high school who are interested in pursuing careers in STEM, what would that advice, whether it's motivation or just general advice, be?
I would say, come on down. We need you. Don't let pervasive stereotypes about what science is and what scientists do deter you. I am a living example. You can shape your journey, you can shape your career, and you can shape the future of this world.
Wow, that's great advice. And then I guess we got one more, so I'll just kind of mash them together. But what are some opportunities that you know of, whether they're specific or just general, for junior high schoolers and high schoolers to get involved in science, whether it's research or competitions?
Excellent question. This I know very well because we were a science fair family. So my kids have gone through the entire science fair thing. So there's the Twin Cities Regional Science Fair for our area. Every area has a regional science fair. In Twin Cities, I think there's 4 or 5 regional areas. And so go onto their website and see what area you belong to. And then that is where you can actually present your work. And you can have a poster, or you can just write a small paper about your work, and you get to be in this community and actually see what others are doing and look at other people's projects and get inspired. So the first year I recommend, don't even do a project if you don't know what you're doing or what to do, etc. Go to your regional science fair. It's on a Friday evening usually. You just go look around at what people are doing. Start with the middle schoolers, work your way up to the high schoolers, and look at the different projects, and then figure out what it is that I feel strongly about. What should I work on? And then start working on that project and find some mentors. Look on the website and see what other people have done, how they have done it, how they present their work. There are so many great websites, Science Buddies. Just look at science fair advice and things like that. So that's Twin Cities Regional Science. There's also Junior Science Humanities Symposium. And that is a wonderful opportunity to present your work. Just write a paper, it gets selected, then you get presented. So, and you get scholarships. That's the best part. So I will make it very real for you. Somebody told me that they were looking for judges at a science fair. I knew nothing about science fairs in the Twin Cities. At 3M, they sent it to us and said, we really need some judges, so please show up. I looked at it and it says it's a Twin Cities Regional Science Fair. And I was like, oh, this seems interesting. So my husband and I both showed up, and it was fascinating. Kids had done little experiments like, how do you know that there is a chicken in this egg? How do you know whether soda stains my teeth? How do you know if which basketball is filled right with the right amount of air? And all these kids who were doing great experiments about the things that they're looking at. How much sugar can you reduce in a cookie that it still tastes sweet? You know, all those kinds of things kids had done. So I came back and I said, you know, our kids should be doing that. They're always looking at different things to do. And so my daughter said, I want to, so daddy was making bread and she was blah, 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 talking. And daddy said, quit talking, Manashri, I'm measuring the ingredients. And she was like, why is it important? It's only bread. And he said, no, it's very important to have the right amount of ingredients. She said, what will happen, daddy, if we double the sugar? And he said, let's do an experiment. Let's double the sugar. So we doubled the sugar, and of course the bread was completely different looking. And she was like, oh my God, how about if we double the water? So we doubled the water, and she took a picture of that bread. And soon enough, we had 12 bread. She had 12 pictures. And I was like, do you want to write about this and tell people about this? She's like, yeah. She was only in 6th grade. And she put all the pictures together, wrote a paper, and she got invited at the Science Symposium. She presented and she got $25. That was the most exciting day of her life. And she was hooked. She's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. So that's the kind of way you can progress. And long story short, she went all the way to ISEF as a 9th grader, International Science and Engineering Fair, all because it was inspiring to be part of this community where everybody was doing experiments and doing these things and talking about it. So highly recommend that you follow those up and look them. And you will find mentors all around the place who want to help do these experiments and things like that within your community.
Okay, so we just have a few announcements that we would like to make. So if it's okay, I think I might need to share my screen.
Yes, sorry, stop, share. There we go.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so looks it. So first, We want you to join us for our signature event, India Fest, on August 14th on the state Capitol grounds. My first India Fest was as a volunteer in 2019, and I can't wait to go back to an in-person event this year. By the way, Jayshree's daughter, Manashri, was also an IAM volunteer and intern just like me. So I hope you all can join me this year. And if you're interested in volunteering, feel free to check out our website. We strongly encourage all high school students who graduated in 2021 and are off to college to apply for an IAM Student Achievement Award. So if you know of any high schoolers who graduated in 2021, please feel free to share this opportunity with them. Here are ways you can connect with IAM on our website, Facebook, Twitter, and as well as Instagram. And finally, we'd like to extend our sincere thanks to our esteemed guest, Dr. Jayshri Seth. Thank you also to IAM's board and Alice Northrup, who helped organize this event. Finally, thank you from the IAM interns for joining us today. And we hope you enjoyed today's presentation and look forward to seeing you at future events as well as India Fest. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All the best.